Hello everyone, and welcome to this session. You would not believe it, but this is a session I've been planning to do for at least 4 years. So it is 4 years in the making. Why did it take such a long time? A couple of reasons for that. One is that in the corporate consulting bit, which is most of what I do, this really is not an area that is used a lot. Now, I'm not saying it's not important. It is important. That is why we are trying to learn it. But the point is that if you're thinking of an advanced Excel user, typically a what if is not what they'll be working on. And that doesn't mean it isn't useful for them. It just means that the way you do it is not something that people are trained on very often. And it's not that in the typical process of spending 5 years in the corporate, you automatically pick up from your peers how to work with what if analysis. So there are 4 problem statements that I'll be taking you through. We are going to work on the first one, that is scenario manager. That is the simplest one, because in that one, there are no formulas. The second one will be go seek. In go seek, there will be one changing cell, which means one variable where you're putting in values and you're aiming to hit a certain target. So there's one destination cell and there's one changing cell. And then we have data table. Data table is substantially more complicated. Data table helps you create simulation by putting in multiple values within one of the inputs in a formula. And then finally, we have solver. Solver essentially is linear programming. So I'll be covering one of the most common ones, that is the transportation problem, where we talk about how a company can optimize the way they have to transfer products from the warehouse to the distributor in a way that they are meeting the capacity constraint and also they're able to reduce the cost, minimize the cost. So this is the workshop flow. For the scenario manager, I'll be taking an example from Chios, where the example is that they are creating a new product line, a high-priced premium tea, and they want to understand what impact will that have on the top line. So they want to create an optimistic, a moderate, and a pessimistic scenario. Every business, when you launch something new, like an automotive company, of course, you expect, sales through the roof and, amazing pre-bookings and great feedback. But it's not that every product succeeds in the market, right? Despite the R&D, the marketing, the research. So obviously, there are different scenarios that you would want to prepare. In GoSeek, we'll be doing an example of Tata Motors, where they want to hit a target profit of 500 crore. And there is a fixed cost and a variable cost. Now, we know that there is a variable cost for the production of each vehicle. And there's also a fixed cost that has already been incurred. And they want to understand how many bookings are we targeting if we want to hit 500 CR. In the data table, we'll be working with a solar and energy company, Gensol, where we talk about how installing solar panels or moving from regular traditional energy over to renewable is going to help you save cost. And because this is a pricing calculator, we'll be looking at the payback period, which means, let's say you are opting for a two-wheeler, which is an EV against a typical, petrol. What is the advantage that it offers to you? Obviously, the upfront cost will be higher, but then you expect that if you ride it for 50,000 kilometers, you will recoup the cost and you will probably save some money. Of course, the factor is that you also are environmentally conscious and all of that, but there is also a pricing factor involved in it. And the last most difficult one will be for Unilever, where they want to send products from the warehouse to the destination, that is the distributor. Each distributor has a demand. Each warehouse has a capacity constraint. And we have to keep all those constraints in mind while we are trying to minimize our cost, right? Perfect. Let's get started. So the basic idea of what if analysis is that it allows you to use several different set of values, basically like a simulation, a sensitivity, and you can also use one or multiple formula where you want to explore different results. Like when we talk about finance, we talk about risk management, financial sensitivity analysis. Let's say you're in the pharmaceutical sector, you will talk about running simulation. But fact of the matter is that we are always doing a what if analysis, which means we ask ourselves that what if one of the value changes, what impact will it have on the final result? Now, under what if, scenario manager, goal seek, and data table is already there. So you don't have to do anything about it. But for the solver, you have to enable it. And this is how we do it. We will have to go to Excel options, add-ins, and we will have to enable solver. Now, remember, I will be post this session sharing all the files with you. So the moment the session is over, I will share all the problems as well as the solution with you. Why did I not share it earlier? I don't have a good answer. Probably I should have. It's just that right now, because we have 60 minutes, I would love for you to practice with me, but I hope you appreciate that that will take a lot of time. And I would rather want you to look at how I'm doing it, why we are doing it, ask me questions. And of course, you will have to practice to really grasp the top concept, but that you can do later as well. So the first example we're working on is scenario. But before that, I want to tell you how to enable solver. If you notice, in the data tab, everyone, we already have a what if analysis on the right side. And under that, we have three options. We have scenario manager, goal seek, and data table. But to enable the solver that you see on the right side, I will have to go to file, options. You only have to do this one time. So we go to file, options, then we select add-ins, and then we select our Excel add-in, which means that it's already inbuilt in Excel, but because this is not meant for the typical user, they have disabled it. Only if you really want to use it, you have to go ahead and enable it. So when I click on go, among other things, you will see we have solver. And the moment you tick on it, the solver appears on your Excel. But we'll park that for later. Let's start with scenario manager. Now the problem statement is this. If you can see, let's not hurry into the solution. Let's understand what the problem is. So Chayo's a popular chain, wants to analyze the financial impact of launching a new range of premium teas across its various outlets. And the management wants to understand how they can work with different pricing strategy, which means that obviously the customer demand would vary depending on the pricing that you opt for, and that will impact their overall top line. So there are three potential scenarios that we are looking at. Number one, the optimistic one is that there is a high customer demand. People like the fact that there is a premium product and there's a good perceived value, which means there'll be a 20% increase in my top line, which means we are pricing the tea at 150 per cup. The moderate scenario is that there is a 10% increase in the top line, where we are pricing at 130. And the pessimistic is that there is only a 5% increase in the top line, where we are pricing it at 120. So the problem that we are working with looks like this. I've already created the model. Do remember that when you're working as a consultant and analyst, your job is also to create the model. It would almost never happen that the client gives you this file in such a nice prepared manner. Think about it. I mean, the client is at most going to give you the problem like this, maybe not even in this clean manner. It might not even be this clear. Maybe what they're doing is just to tell you verbally what the problem is. Maybe you have to talk to the stakeholder, understand the business requirement, and then create the model like this. So let me walk you through it. The current sales volume, the number of unit is 1,000. That's just an assumed value. The current customer demand, remember, could be three levels. So I will say it will be low, medium, or high. Then we say that what is the increase in volume? Now remember, that is the expected increase, that we know can happen, 5%, 10%, or 20%. Then we have revised sales volume. That means initially, if I was doing 1,000 unit, now I'm expecting I'll do 1,100 unit. Then of course we have the price per unit as well. And then we have the revenue. Now, if you see, the formulas are very straightforward. The revised sales volume is nothing but 10% increase on 1,000. That means if originally you were doing 1,000, now you're doing 1,100. Then we have the revenue, which is nothing but the price per unit multiplied by the number of units. Now, here's the thing. If you're thinking, Havish, why can't we just, make another column, call it low and medium and, put in different values of 5% and 20%? Can't I do that? Of course you can, but this is not going to make it look better. It's going to be very confusing. And while there are advantages of presenting different scenarios at once, you have to understand some of these models are very large and very complicated. So you can't just start adding columns to show every scenario. Rather, the scenario has to be available on call. That means if the client wants to see one scenario, you should have a button so that you can show that scenario. If they want to see the previous scenario, there should be a button to show that scenario. So what I would like to do here is to go to what if analysis and we will go to scenario manager. In this, right now, there are no scenarios that have been defined. So I will add a scenario. We can also give it a name. So I will call the first one my optimistic scenario, everyone. Now it asks me what are the changing cells. That means what are the cells that will change in value. Now, because I want to select different cells, I will select them by pressing Control. That means I will click on 1 and then 2 and then 3, right? The comment is just a comment that you want to write for yourself so that later on, if you want to remember how you decided what the optimistic scenario is, you can do that, right? So just for you to see this, I'm just giving an example. I will say this is based on discussions with the founder, just as an example, right? Now, the moment I press OK, it is going to ask me what are the values that we want to keep in C4, C5, C9. So I will say, because this is my optimistic scenario, I will say C4 will be high. We are expecting a high demand. C5 will be, remember, C5 will be at a 20% increase. That means we will make it 20% and we are expecting to price in the most optimistic scenario at 150 because we feel that the customers have an appetite for paying much more. I'll press OK. And now you notice we have an optimistic scenario that we have created. Let me make one more. But before I do that, I'm just shifting the color, so that you can see what are the changing set. Basically, these three, everyone, where I put a color are the changing set. This, of course, is the final formula. Let's create one more. So data, what if analysis, scenario manager. Now I can do it a little more quickly. I will say, after optimistic, my second one is my moderate scenario. So I'll say my moderate scenario. Changing cells will be the same. I'm not adding a comment. Now I'll say that for my C4, I'll call it medium. Then this will be at 10% and it will be at 130 per unit. So this will be 10% and at 130 per unit. And then the final one will be again at, we call this my pessimistic scenario. And this will be same changing cell. This will be low at a meager 5% increase and at a 120, like this. Okay. Now let me demonstrate to you how we actually show it to a client. So let's say I'm speaking to the CFO and the CFO says, hey, what are the projections? So I can simply go to what if, open my scenario manager, and I can show it in any order as we want. That means it's available on call. If I say, hey, this is the pessimistic scenario where we are expecting a low customer demand, but we're still expecting a 5% increase in volume. After all, the average price is going higher. That means at 120 unit per unit, we will do 126. In the moderate scenario, we will do a 143. And optimistically, we are doing 180. What you can also do is, in a much larger scale, imagine there are 5 analysts working on the same template and everybody is creating their own scenario. I can also merge, which basically means, let's say there were 2 workbooks. I've created 3 scenarios of my own. Someone else has also created 3 other scenarios. I can actually merge all the 6 into one single scenario manager. And we can also look at the summary. So if you see, when I click on the summary, I will select what is my result cell. So if I choose my result cell as the final formula and I click on OK, it creates a very nice, do you see this? Very nice summarization for me, telling me that these are my three changing cells, which are taking the value of high, medium, low. And at different scenarios, this is the top line that I'll be getting. So that's the first example, everyone. Very straightforward. Let me know if you have any question. Then I'll move on to goal seek after this.
Can you repeat result scenario again?
How to create the scenario or how to run it?
How to run it? Result
Sure.
scenario.
Once the scenarios have been created, I simply have to go back to what if analysis, scenario manager. All the scenarios that you've created will be visible in the list. And whichever one you want to display, I can just click on it and then select show. That's all. And you can even edit it. So for example, if I'm presenting to a client, and this is very common, the client might say, Havish, in the medium scenario, you're expecting a 10%, but actually 11% is more realistic. So what can I do? I can just go to edit. Okay. And if you notice on the fly, I can change it to 11%. So now I have revised my moderate scenario. So now it will look like this.
That last table, what you have shown me.
Sure. For looking at a bird's eye view of all the scenarios in one page so that I can compare all of them rather than clicking on each one of them one by one, I just have to go to the summary option. So I'll do it one more time. Let me remove the scenario summary. What if analysis scenario manager. And the moment I click on the summary, it asks me what is the result cell. That means that after all the inputs have been changed, that means the 10% has become 11%, the price has changed. Then it tells me that my final formula is in C11. That's all. When I click on OK, you will notice it gives me a summary like this. What could be a large scale example? To be very honest, a large scale example would just be with additional input and more scenarios, right? But it doesn't mean that there'll be 50 scenarios that you're creating. Generally, 3, 5, 7 is what we do, depending on the sector, depending on the function we are working with. But it could have like 10, 12, 15 input variables as well. But I would say 8 out of 10 times what we use scenario manager for are really not very large files because there are other methods available. This is a very helpful tool. I'm not saying it's the best tool or something you should use all the time. But again, that's a call that you have to take as a consultant and analyst. Is a scenario manager the best way to present data to your client or to your internal manager? Can we change the name of changing cell in the summary? Let me have a look at. You mean these cells, everyone? Why not? Have a look. Even though I was planning to cover this in the next example, we can do it now. Please have a look. What if I select my cell C4 and I come to my name box, okay? Remember, not on the formula bar. On the left, we have a name box. I can just call it current customer demand. Now, I haven't tried it, so I'll have to see if it actually works or not. But let's see. So now, if I go back to my scenario manager and let us say I go back to optimistic and I edit it, and rather than selecting C4, C5, C9, what if I go to formulas and I enter the name that I have given, right? Basically the same thing. Rather than selecting C4, we have given a more meaningful name to the cell C4. So now you notice everything else remains the same. But now when you create your scenario, right? When I click on the summary, look what happens. Now, rather than showing you the name of the cell, it will show you, the position of the cell, it will actually show you a more meaningful descriptive name. So just to complete it with all the others as well, again, I'll come here, I'll call it, this is my increase in volume. Remember, spaces are not allowed when you're giving a name. And this, everyone, will be my price per unit. I can just come back to my scenario manager now. Of course, we'll have to edit it one by one, but that's okay. I can just put my current customer demand, comma, Then I will select my formulas. Let me see how I can put it. 1 second. Since I'm not able to, can I select the cell? Okay, that's also not working. I might have to type it if I'm not mistaken. These are slightly manual things, but I think it should work. Then we can say price per unit, and I don't see a reason why this wouldn't work. Let me quickly do this for the other two as well, everyone. So rather than writing the cell reference, we are giving the more descriptive name that we have given. And as you can see, once I have done this, I should be again able to click on summary. And as you can see, now it gives me the, rather than the cell reference, it tells me a more descriptive name, something of our choice, right? So this is, a better user experience. We could have done this for the result cell as well with the same process. Right? Okay, so everyone, let's not overcomplicate the problem. It's very straightforward. You might be wondering, but Havish, where are the formulas and the calculations and all of that? That is something we do in the forthcoming example. Scenario Manager is very nice because of its simplicity, which is what I've shown to you, right? Okay, so let me close it. I will be sharing both the problem and the solution with you. So you will have the raw file so that you can practice. And after the session is over, I'll also be sharing the solution file, what we have done in the workshop, so that you can look at that as well. So my second problem now is a little more advanced. Let's understand the business context first. Tata Motors has launched a new electric vehicle, which they have, Tata Curve. And they are aiming for a target profit of 500 CR. Now, these numbers are hypothetical, so don't go by the numbers, all right? Now, the company's cost structure is a fixed cost of 50 CR that they've already spent, or they are spending each quarter on R&D, marketing, and overhead expenses. That means irrespective of the number of vehicles that they are selling, they are spending a fixed cost, an FC of 50 CR. The variable cost depends on the number of vehicles they're producing. Material, labor, typically, that would be 10 lakh per vehicle manufactured. And obviously, they are planning to sell it at 14. So there's a margin that they have. But remember, there is a fixed cost as well. So don't just think that, oh, they're earning a 4 lakh on every vehicle. After all, you also have to recoup the cost of your fixed cost. So they want to understand that if they're targeting 500 crore as their targeted profit, how many units do they need to sell? First, the break even to be able to, earn back the 50 CR. And then every additional unit that they're selling, they'll be earning an extra 4 lakhs on it, right? So this is our problem statement. Now we are doing goal seek. We call it goal seek because we're actually seeking a goal. The goal in this case would be to hit a target profit of 500 crore. So my problem is there is a projected sale. The reason I've colored it because that's the changing cell. That is where I want to run iterations. There is a price per unit of 40, a cost of 10. The fixed cost is 50. All of these are values, everyone, no formulas. The total revenue will be nothing but the number of vehicles sold multiplied by the price per unit divided by 100. Why divided by 100? Because this is in lakh, but I want to change the unit of measurement into crore. Also, what is the cost? The cost, everyone, is C2 multiplied by C4. That means 1000 multiplied by 10. That is basically 10,000 lakhs for 1,000 cars manufactured, or 100 crore plus C5, that will be 50. So that gives us 150 crore. And obviously the target profit is nothing but the total revenue minus the total cost. Very straightforward. Now, if you say, Havish, we can just do it manually, right? Sure. I mean, I guess you can put in 5,000. That gives you 150 CR. Now you say, okay, if I want to do 500 crore profit, I should be putting 15,000. That gives you 550. But we don't want 550. We want 500. So now you will have to reduce it to 14,000. Now I'll have to reduce it to 13,700. Do you see the point? Like, I am able to do it, but depending on how many calculations are there, it will take you time. And this is a very inefficient way. Like, this is not how you build a model, right? Like, you're not going to sit in front of the client and like a monkey keep on putting different values, right? So what we will do here is that we will instruct Excel that rather than me, everyone, rather than me going and keeping different values of unit projected sales, I would like Excel to run different iterations. So imagine Excel is putting 1001, 1002, and it will do it really fast till it arrives at the number that I need to sell to earn a target profit of exactly 500 crore. So if you see, I go to data, then we select what if analysis and goal seek. Now you might say, is that it? We only have one cell and one changing cell. That's the point. When you have multiple changing cells, we use solver that I'll be covering later. Now, while this might seem very simple, you saw that doing it manually is not a very efficient way. It's not user-friendly. What do I say? I want to set the cell, that's my target cell, to C10. That means I want to change C10 to achieve a certain target, which in this case is 500. Now, I know that every time I change the cell C2, the target profit keeps on changing. So rather than me going to C2 and keeping different values, I'm instructing Excel to do it. And the moment I press OK, you will notice it runs different iteration till it reaches the correct answer and it tells you, hey, you need to sell 13,750 unit to hit a target profit of 500. And it's so quick. Suddenly, if the client says or the manager says, okay, but what if I want to do break even? Now I can just go back to Go Seek and I can say, you know what? I just want to hit 0. So how many units do we need to sell? Now it tells me that once I sell 1250 unit, I'm at my break-even point, right? Or maybe you are very optimistic, you want to hit 2000 CR, or maybe a more, a number in the middle, like 2200 CR. I can just go and say, change this to 2200 by changing the cell C2. And as you can see, now I need to sell 56,250 unit to hit a target profit of 2,200 crore, right? Remember, even though in the goal seek, it seems that in the changing cell, you can select multiple cell, it won't work. Like if you try to do it, it will tell you the cell must contain a formula. Let me change this to C10. Do you see this? It tells you, like when you select multiple cell, it doesn't stop you. So a lot of people feel, oh, but Havish, why did you choose only one changing cell? I could have chosen 3 cell. But even though it allows you to select it, when you press OK, it tells you have made a mistake and you're not actually allowed to select multiple cell, right? Let me know if you have any question. I also want to tell you how we can do this with generative AI to write the VBA code, because the VBA code will actually run this much faster, right? But we'll do that in a while. First, tell me if you have any question. I'll just show you what I had done like this. Very simple, very elegant. And it's one of those things where when you don't use it, you never feel the need for it. But when you see it, and I've been doing corporate trainings for so many years now, when I show it to a client, it's like a wow factor. Like I said, it's not the most complicated thing in the world, but it is very, very practical and something you will end up using very often. And not just in finance, in pretty much any area, any function that you're working with, there are use cases for doing this. Can we plot a chart for this break even? I mean, that's not really the objective here. I mean, sure, I understand why you're asking, because you might want to visualize something, but I would probably skip that point because right now we are focusing just on creating the model. The visualization will be a different topic altogether because we'll have to set up the model in a certain different way. So yeah, this is just focused on the modeling, arriving at the target result in a much quicker manner. Let's not focus on the visualization, at least in the scope of this example, right? Okay, I want to show you something now. Do you see that every time you run it, it does take like a few seconds? You might say, fine, Havish, I'm happy to wait for 7 seconds. But it's not that simple. We, in my team, me and Talha, we work with files sometimes that are 150 MB, an Excel file with 200 sheets in it, 10,000 formulas in it. And you know what happens? When you try to run a goal seek, you are only selecting one formula and one changing cell. But when you try running it on a 150 MB file with 200 sheets and 10,000 formula, it will crash. It might sometimes take 2 minutes, 3 minutes to arrive at the correct answer. So what we need is a way of doing this much faster. How am I going to do that? Now, I'm not going to attempt to teach you VBA right now. I will tell you how you can use generative AI to get the VBA code, and I'll also tell you how to write the VBA code in your file, right? But let me answer the question first. Nilesh, is it necessary to keep every value in general category? Like in example, you have put rupee. Oh, no, not at all. This is just the formatting that I have kept of the cell. I mean, it could be any format, that hardly matters, right? So that's the format of the cell. That means the way the user sees the data. Like even if you put like a decimal or you change it to a percentage, it won't really change. I mean, even if you make it 1400%, even though this is completely meaningless, I just wanted to illustrate that it will still work, right? Because the underlying number for 1400%, think about it, is still 14, right? So it will still work. The formatting doesn't, create any impact. Okay, let's go over to the generative AI part. This is very cool. Have a look. I can do it on any Gen AI tool, Copilot, Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT. So I'm going to say, I want a VBA code. What do I want? I want to run goalseek, change the cell. No, first take an input from the user between 0 and 5,000. So I'm keeping a data validation, a restriction that the user cannot enter a numerical input above or below this value. And now I want to say that change the cell C10 to make it the same as the input that the user has given by changing the cell, which is the input cell, the changing cell, that would be C2. I'll also share the prompt with you on the chat window, everyone. And that's it. I run it. I'm doing this on the free version of Gemini. I do have the paid version, but I'm not using that. It writes the entire VBA code for me. Fantastic. Before I run it, I'll just broadly tell you what is happening. First, you're prompting the user for an input. That means the user has to provide an input between 0 and 5,000. This is the if statement, the conditional statement, where if the input is outside the range, then it won't work. And then you're running goalseek. So this is the code. In C10, I'm running goalseek. What is my goal? It is not a fixed value. So it is the user input that is being provided, and the changing cell is C2. And that's it. I can just copy the code. How do I put it in my file? First, you will have to save your file as a macro-enabled workbook. That means I'll have to go to File, Save As, and as you can see, it won't work with a regular Excel file, which is Excel SX, everyone. It will have to be a macro-enabled workbook. That would be the second option that you get in the dropdown, Excel SM, Excel macro-enabled workbook, because we are putting a VBA code in it. Okay, that's step one. Now to paste the code, I can simply go to my developer tab. Now, if you don't see the developer tab on your Excel, not to worry. Just like we enabled solver, because that is only meant for the power user. Similarly, if you want to enable developer, I will have to go to File, Options, and Customize ribbon. Remember, for the solver, we had to go to Add-ins, but for the developer tab, we have to go to Customize ribbon and then simply enable the developer tab. Again, if you're thinking, but Havish, if the feature is already there, why haven't they just enabled it? Because why would they? This is meant for advanced user, hence the name developer. So once you enable it, you will get the developer tab. I will go to Visual Basic. Now don't get scared, even if you don't know programming or have done it before. We don't really have to do much. We just have to copy and paste what Gemini has given to us. So what I'm doing is, I'll first identify my file. So if you notice, my file is goalseek, this one. In this file, I'm going to right-click and insert a module. That's all. Select the file, right-click, insert a module. Just give me a moment to turn off the annotations so that it doesn't distract anyone. Just a moment. Okay, cool. So I made a module one more time, right click on the file, insert a module, and you know what? That is it. You just have to paste it. That's all. One more time, the user will be asked for an input with a validation 0 and 5. If it is not within the validation, it won't work. And then it is running GoSeek, which is this line of code. That's it. And now if you see, I can just go back and I can make a shape. So insert, in fact, why a shape? Let's make an icon. So I'll make an icon. It could even be a picture if you want. And I'm selecting, let us say finance. So I'm going to put the icon of the rupee symbol. Why not? Let's keep it here. That looks nice. Change the color to green. Now on this icon, shape, illustration, image that you have created, I can right click and I can assign a macro. That means for the user to run the macro, they don't have to go through hoops. They just have to click on this icon. So the macro is the one we created, which is GoalSeek user input. And as you can see, the next time I want to run it, I can just click. It will ask me for a number. What if I choose a number beyond the range, like 10,000? It will tell me, please enter a valid number. One more time, if I enter 2,500, it not just gives you the answer and a confirmation that it has done it. Did you see how fast that was? Remember those few seconds that it took with larger files, with more complex formula? Sometimes it takes 10, 20, 30 seconds, and there is a danger that the file might crash. And imagine if you're running multiple GoSeeks, it takes a lot of time, and there's always a risk of the file crashing. This, on the other hand, is instantaneous. Check this out. If I keep 4,000, it's literally in a second, right? Again, if I go back and I make it 0, it's again in a second. Terrific, right? So we've actually done GoSeek and we made the process, the user experience even better. Not just that it looks better, it also runs better, more efficiently and faster, right? Okay, so I'll take your question and then we move on to data table after this. Nilesh, can I brief this once again? I am going to brief it, but very quickly. After all, the session is being recorded and that will be shared with you as well. But all I did was I went to GNAI. This is the prompt, everyone. I want a VBA code. I want to run GoSeek. You know what? In fact, I'll also put the prompt here so that, all of you can try it out yourself. One moment. Right? So I said I want a VBA code. I want to run GoSeek. Take an input between 0 and 5,000. Change the cell C10 to make it the same as the input by changing C2. That's it. Then I copied it. I went back. I inserted a module in my workbook. But first, I saved my Excel file as a macro-enabled workbook. And then in the module, I simply pasted the code. And once the code is pasted, I put an image, right-click, assign macro, and then I assign the code to it. That's all. Of course, you'll have to go back and practice this. But, from my side, I'm sharing the prompt as well as the code with you. So you can refer to my file if you get stuck anywhere. All good? Okay, let's move on. My session is going to take a little longer. I hope that's okay with everyone. I know it's very late in the day, but I hope you're finding it helpful. And I don't want to do it in a hurry. Data table, let's understand the problem. So Gensol, which is an energy solution provider, wants to understand how varying two key variables, the installation cost and the monthly energy saving, will impact the payback period of solar panel installation. Simple. The customer is paying a certain amount right now. By switching to a solar panel, they will reduce their energy spent, but there is also an upfront cost that they have to spend on the installation. And that's a hefty fee. So even if they are saving a little bit of money per month, they have also spent money in the beginning, which is that upfront cost. So that is what they want to understand, that we need to create a comprehensive data-driven approach to estimate the financial return under various scenarios. The scenarios would be, what if the energy saving is only 90% or 50%? What if the upfront cost is more or less? Now you might say, but Havish, why would it be a different energy saving? Why not? After all, the amount of the sunlight that you get in Delhi versus Bombay versus Gujarat is going to be different, isn't it? The amount of sunlight that you get in 1 month is going to be different to the other month, is it not? So substantially more difficult problem than what we have done before. But now we'll close the three options in what if, then I'll come to solver. So this is the first one. Let's understand the way the file has been structured, everyone. So if you see, I have my installation cost, that's a fixed cost. Then I have my current monthly cost. This is the energy reduction. That means I will be able to reduce my energy consumption by 75%. So the monthly cost with solar installed will be what? C3 multiplied by C4. That means, or let's put it in a way that after the energy reduction, your revised cost is only 75% of your original. That means if you were originally paying 1500 per month, now at 75%, you're only paying 75% of 1500, that is 1125. So the energy saving is the difference, that is 1500 minus 1125. The annual saving will be multiplied by 12, and this is the payback period, which is nothing but the initial upfront cost, 50,000, divided by the annual saving. That means it will take you 11.11 years for you to recoup the initial cost. Make sense? Now, this also means that if this was 25%, that means if your revised energy consumption is only 25% of your original monthly cost, that means it will only take you 3.7 years. If it was 10%, then it becomes 3.09. On the other hand, if it is 90, that means you're only saving 10% on your bill. It will take you 27 years to recoup that initial 50,000. But if the initial cost is not 50 and it is only 25, then it will only take you 30. So you see how the formulas are connected, right? Okay. Now, imagine if I ask you, what if I'm changing 1500? That means I'm trying at 1500, 11 years, at 2008, at 3005, at 4004. Now, if you're wondering, but Havish, why is it that if my monthly cost goes up, then the payback period comes down? It makes sense, right? If I'm a user who actually doesn't have a very large bill, for example, my monthly bill is typically between 2500 to 3000. For me, between 2500 and 3000, I might save much more because my fixed cost is 50. On the other hand, somebody whose monthly bill is only 750, they will take longer to recoup the 50,000 because the 75% of 750 is actually not a lot of money. They're only saving 188 a month. On the other hand, somebody whose bill is 7,500 a month will save 1,875 a month. So because they are a heavy power user, they will only take 2.22 years to recoup their cost. Now, this is great. I can keep on putting different number. You can also say, Havish, even better, you can go to data validation and just make a list of 1,500, 2,000, 2,500. But here's the thing, right? When I'm presenting a scenario to my client, do you think I will go and one by one keep on selecting different numbers? Even if I can, and the client is okay, how do I compare it to? Like, how do I show 1,500 and 300 and 3,000 at the same time? You get my point, right? If you're thinking, why not just make multiple column? Again, the data will become bloated. Like there's no need of repeating this column multiple times. For example, if you're thinking, why not just make new columns and I can just copy the formulas and I can change it to 2 and I can make it 3 and I can make it 4 and I can make it 5. This is correct. But do you think this is the best way to present your data to a client? Like, would you like to see the data or the model presented like this? Clearly not. So we need a more elegant way of doing this, which is what I'll show you. Now, please pay attention to the way I have structured my data. I put in some values here, 1500 all the way till 5000. What I want to do now is I want to keep my formula. Now, where I keep the formula, pay attention, equal to C10. That means I am referring to the cell which has the formula in it. Now, my column has an input, multiple inputs, right? 1500, 2000, all the way till 5000. This input is going to be sent to which cell? To the cell C3. So in a way, I want to take the first column input 1500, send it to C3. Then I want to take 2000, send it to C3. Can you write a formula to do it? No, not possible. But what I can do is I can select all these cells, pay attention. I can go to what if analysis and select data table. Now it looks very simple, but you really have to understand it. There is no row input because after all, my inputs are in one column, which is column E. So this will be blank. What is the column input? My column input, everyone, will be the cell which will take the input of all the values from this column, which will be the cell C3. So think what will happen before I press OK. It will keep the value of 2000 in C3. So obviously the result will change. And that is what you will see in the F column. Then it will take 2500, replace it in C3. The result will change and that value will be shown in column F. So if you see, when I press OK, it tells me, obviously at 1500, I get the same result. But now it tells me how my payback period comes down. So for a customer, when I'm presenting a scenario, I can actually say that, hey, what band do you fall under? If you're a heavy user, your payback period will be lesser. If you're not a very heavy user, your payback period will be more. Also, if you see the formula in the cell, it says table C3. Now, in case you're thinking, but Havish, I've never seen this function before. The reason is that table is not actually a function. This is something very unique and special that happens when you create a data table, right? Which means you never type it. Even if you try to type it, it won't work. Like if I try to type it in a cell, you will notice it won't allow you. It will tell you there's nothing like it. Also, because all of these cells are connected, if I try to delete any one of them, it will tell me I can't do it because it's a part of a data table. So I'll not get into too much of the technical detail, but remember this formula has to be there in the top right corner. If it is not there, what will happen? If I delete it, everything changes to 0. Please ask your questions. There are 2 other variations I would like to show you, but I would like you to ask me questions first on this. Dilesh, I'm not going to again explain, but if there's a specific part you can ask me, like I'll be happy to show you the input I've taken. The only reason is because, like I said, I will be sharing the file with you. You will have, the solution and the problem with you. But this is what I've done. I've selected all the cells from E3 till F11, ensuring that the top right corner is the formula. And then in my data table, my column input is C3 because I'm essentially taking each of these values in column E and replacing C3. So obviously when C3 will change, my final payback period will also change, right? Like this.
Can we have more input parameters?
You can only have one row input and one column input. So that is what I'll cover in the next example. That, for example, let me just complete it first. So you can have 2 variables, one in the row, one in the column. After all, there are only 2 dimensions possible, right? Now, if you're thinking, but Havish, will I not have like multiple inputs in my formula? Sure. After all, I have all these inputs to my formula, is it not? You can have multiple inputs leading to your final formula, but when you're running the data table, there are only 2 things you can change, 1 variable and 2 variables, right? You can't change more than that. And if you really think about it, that should be more than enough, right? Because after all, Excel is a 2-dimensional software, right? So, I mean, you can only have something in the row and in the column. So even if you could keep a 3rd variable, how would you put it on an Excel file? Like it would require some thinking, but if you really think about it, I know you might say, but so, Havish, would it not be nice to have a 3rd variable? What would you even do with the 3rd variable? Where will you keep it? because Excel, after all, is a two-dimensional software, right? Okay, let me do this. And I'll do it a little quicker because now you have understood the basic premise. Everyone, now you have two variables. What is my column input? It is what will change C3. And what is my row input? It is the energy reduction which will come in C4. That's it. But now where will the formula come? Because in the last example, remember, we kept the formula in the top right corner. But what we do here is we keep it in the top left corner. And these are mandatory. Don't feel that, oh, I can keep it somewhere else. It has to be kept like this. It's a hard and fast rule. So when I put in equal to and I select the formula, the rest is very simple. I can select all of it. What if analysis data table? Row input, remember, will be 25, 35, 50, 75, 90. After all, they are in a row. And which cell are they changing? C4. My column input is in column E, 1500 all the way till 5000. Which input are they changing? It is changing C3. That is it. When I click on OK, you can see that at 1500 and 75% with 11.11 payback. And you can see that at 1500 and 75%, we get the same answer, which is 11.11. But more importantly, I get like a complete list, right? Like I can compare, for example, 5,000, 50%, I will do 1.67 payback, very less. But if I'm only getting a 10% saving and I'm still spending 90% of my original cost, it will still take me 8.33 years, despite the fact that my monthly expense is quite high. So you can look at various combinations, right? Also, what I can do is, if you look at this formula is very confusing because if you send this file to someone, they might get very confused thinking, what is this formula doing? They might try to delete it and now nothing will work. So there are two options. The more inelegant ways, you can change the font color to white. That means like this, which is okay, I guess. But a better method would be to right click. I will go to format cells. And now you notice in my custom, in the type, we will keep 3 semicolon. Okay, not a comma, not a colon, a semicolon, like the dot with a comma below it. What does that do? This is the format in Excel that will hide the value in the cell, which I feel is better than changing the font color to white. Because, the font color can't be white. What if, for example, what if I kept the font color as white, but the cell background color was like a blue? Then the font color white will not work. And that's not a very elegant way. The elegant method would be to put 3 semicolons here. And now whatever is the font color, it would not matter because it would still work. Also, I would like to show you like a bonus tip here. Now this, remember, is an advanced example, so be prepared. What if I can let the user also change these values? Now think about it. Right now, I have put a formula, which is plus 500, plus 500. So it's not bad. If I change it to 3000, then all the results change. But then I still have to go and do it manually, is it not? The same goes for the percentage as well. So imagine I want to change the starting value, whether it's 0, 500, 1500, or 2000. What I'll do here is in developer, which is what we enabled, I will go to insert, and you notice there are these form control. ActiveX control only work when you are writing the VBA code. But what I want to show you now doesn't even require a VBA code. What it requires is simply a scroll bar like this. So just like in PowerPoint, you draw a shape like a rectangle, I will select it and I will draw it like this. Looks very nice. What is my objective? The user should be able to click on this and the numbers should change. Let's see how I do it. Right click, format control, no coding required. What is my current value? I will say 0. For example, my minimum value is 0. My maximum value is, let's say, 3000. My incremental change is 500. Page change also I'll keep as 500. And the cell link is the first cell. Before I press OK, think what will happen. Everyone, if the user will click on the next button, the down button, that means the 0 will change, increment to 500. So when the first cell changes to 5, all the others will also increment by 500. So now you notice, this is so cool. Of course, if 0 actually doesn't make sense. So let me just change that to 500 as the minimum value. One moment. Yeah, that's better. So now you notice this is such an elegant way of presenting. I don't have to come here and change the formula. I can just click on the scroll and you see how nice this is. And if you wanted, you could have done it for the percentages at the top as well. I'm not doing that, but this is how I can do it. And I can even do this. This is beautiful. Look how nice this is, right? And this is so elegant, so user-friendly, and so practical for the end client. Both for you when you're presenting as a consultant and analyst, it's helpful. And for the person who's on the receiving end, who's looking at your model, it's very helpful there as well. If you have any quick questions, I'm happy to answer. But again, like I said, I don't need to do the recap because I will be sharing both the file and the solution file and the recording with you, right? The final one is with two formulas. Almost the same thing. So we have done one variable, we have done two variable. Now we have two formula. How come there are two formulas? Because there's one formula for the annual saving and there's one formula for the payback period. This is very simple. My first formula will be equal to annual saving. My second will be equal to payback period. Of course, you can add multiple formulas as well. And now I can select all of this. Just like earlier, I only did with one. That means I went to data, what if, and then data table. And I said my column input is C3. And of course, it will show me different annual savings. Similarly, now I can select both the columns or even more than two. Now, when I come back to data table, row input will be blank, column will be again C3, but rather than just showing me different outputs for annual saving, it will show me for annual saving and the payback period. Otherwise, everything is the same. This is also very helpful in cases where you have a lot of intermediary calculation. You know, like there's A, B, C, and then that's leading to calculation D. Or maybe like a EBITDA calculation where you're calculating in steps. And you don't just want to see the final formula, but you also want to see sort of, multiple nested, not nested, but dependent formulas in a sequence. One final bonus example I would like to cover is where you can choose the formula. See, in the first one variable, I showed you with one. In the multi, I showed you with two. But honestly, there is something in between. Think about it. What if the user only wants to see one formula, but they want to decide what formula they want to see? Just think about it. So what I'll do here is I will first delete everything. Okay, watch this. What I'm going to do, everyone, is to create a drop-down list. We know how to do that. So very simple. I will make a list so that the user can decide what they want. That means data, data validation, and I will say a list. And what does the list say? The source will be, I will type annual savings, everyone, comma, and the other one is payback period. Like this. So the user can choose one of these two, and whichever one they choose should come in the formula. Now, the only thing is, let's also add a color here. Now, the only thing, everyone, is that you know that when I give a name, that means when I give a name to the cell that needs to have an underscore, think about it. So I can't call it annual savings because it won't allow me. It will tell me it's invalid. So that means I will have to call it annual underscore savings, obviously, which is okay. But then the problem is here it is called annual saving without an underscore. The actual name is with an underscore. Now you might say, Havish, why don't you put an underscore in the dropdown? Because why would there be an underscore in the dropdown? It doesn't look good to the client, right? So what I'll do is very smartly, I will create a formula where I'll say equal to, and I will say um, replace. And in my cell, I want to replace the space with an underscore. I'm sorry, substitute in the cell a space with an underscore. Very simple. What will happen? There are two spaces in payback period years. Wherever there's a space, it will become an underscore, which is great. Because remember, this, after all, is the same name that I wanted to give here as well. Let me try that once. Payback period underscore. I'm not sure if the, oh, you know what? Actually, the bracket also might not be allowed. So if you allow me, just give me a moment. Just for simplicity, for the moment, I'm going to remove the bracket, everyone. I'll just call it payback period, right? And here also, we'll change our dropdown. And I'll call it payback period. Of course, I can build a more complicated formula, but for the moment, not required. So now you notice annual saving and payback period. Here also, I'll call it payback underscore period. Why am I doing all of this? Because now in this formula, earlier, what we were doing, everyone? We were selecting either this or this. But now what I'll do is I'll say equal to indirect payback period. Before I run it, think what will happen. What does the user do? The user goes to the cell H2 and he or she selects payback period or annual saving. Simple. When they select annual saving or payback period, we are writing a formula to add that underscore because that's the name. That value that is written in the cell H3 is indirectly taken in the cell F3. Now, if you're thinking why indirect, why can't I just write equal to payback? Because when you write equal to H3, it will not go to the cell payback period, which is C10. It will just show you the text like this. But that's not what I want. What I want is to go indirectly to the value that is represented by the name annual saving. Now, why did I go through all this hassle? Because now the user, when they select payback period, it will show 11. Annual saving will show like this. Pretty cool, right? And finally, to hide this, I can right click, go to format cells, custom, and put 3 semicolon. After all, the user doesn't need to see that intermediary calculation. We will run our data table one more time. So what if analysis, data table, column input is 1500. We have done this before. And this is great. It shows me the answer and the user can just switch to payback period. And you see this, it changes. Here also, in fact, I'll say equal to this. So the heading also changes. Like, there is still a tiny problem that the payback period is coming in like a rupee format, like uh, a currency format. But I'm actually not sure how I'll change that. I'll have to really think about it. Like there would be some method to do that, which I can't think of at the moment. But any which way, I mean, that's something we can figure out for later. For the moment, I'll just keep it as a number format, right? That should solve our purpose like this. Yes, I know it would be nicer to have the currency. At this moment, I can't think how I'll do it. Maybe some conditional formatting or something, but I'll have to think about it, right? In fact, if you just allow me a moment, I would like to try this. Just, I'll take a minute. If it doesn't work, then we'll skip it for now. What if I can select my cells and I can say, in conditional formatting, we would like to apply a rule. And the rule would say that if my cell H2 is equal to annual savings, okay, I would like to format the cell as a currency. So I will say in number, I'll make it a currency, which looks good. No decimal places. And now if you notice, it will show me like this. And one more time in conditional formatting, another rule. And this time I'll say that, okay, if the value in the cell is equal to payback period, then my format that I would like is a number format, right? With 2 decimals. Yeah, I think that should work. Let's have a look. Yep. Okay, I actually didn't do it for the first cell, but let me just complete that. So I'll just edit it. And I will include F3 as well. So again, these are all quite advanced things, right? As I'm hoping you can imagine. But we have been able to get the result that we wanted, right? And that's pretty cool. Okay. Great. So we only have one more example of optimization after this. Let me know if you have any questions and I'll answer that. Then we'll move on to a final example. But I hope you liked this, everyone. Right? So I have saved it. Let me just make sure of that. And happy to know that. Okay, let's come to a final example. I know it's a slightly long session, but I hope it's worth it. Final example. What we are doing is we are trying to understand for Unilever, they have a transportation problem. After all, there's a cost attached to transporting goods. So they want to find the most efficient way of distribution. They have 3 warehouses, ABC, and there are 4 distributors, which is ABCD. Each warehouse has a specific capacity. After all, my warehouse doesn't have unlimited stock. So the capacity constraint is that I can at most supply 4,500, 2,500, and 5,000. And the distributor also has a demand, which is minimum 4,300, 2,000, 2,800, and 2,900. Both of these add to 12,000. Obviously, the transportation cost varies. After all, if I'm catering to a distributor in Delhi from Jammu or catering to a distributor in Delhi from Nagpur, it makes a difference, right? There is a transportation difference, the toll tax, the distance, the time. Now, you might say, but Havish, is it not better if you connect the closest distributor with the closest warehouse? It's not always that simple. For example, I did my internship during my MBA with Coke, and I worked with Reckitt for 2 years, 8 months after that. And these were practical problems we were facing on a daily basis. If you're in supply chain, I was in sales and marketing, but this was a big challenge because there is a cost involved. For example, Airwick, and I'm talking about 2010, 2011, Airwick would be imported. I don't know now if it's being manufactured in India, but back then it was being imported and it would only come to Chennai, if I'm not mistaken. So imagine there is a cost involved to transport it. The last thing you want is that you transport it, there is a cost involved, and then you're not able to sell it through in the market. Why would you want that? So what we want to do is we want to make sure that each distributor is getting what they need without exceeding the capacity of the warehouse. And obviously, you want to minimize the cost. So the problem we are working with is a linear programming minimization problem. I'm sure many of you would have done this in school or college, right? So this is how I've created the model. Let me again remind you, this is not given by the client ever. You have to sit and create it. Of course, they will tell you what is the cost from each warehouse to each destination, depending upon the route. But how you create the model is still your job. Now, why have I already created it? Because, I mean, in a webinar like this, I can't spend that much time. But I would like to again re-emphasize that you are responsible for creating the model. So what we've done here is we have this, what we call cost matrix. It's a matrix of rows and columns, and there is a cost involved. Now, what we are also doing is we are saying there is a recommended shipping model. So these are my changing cell. Remember in GoSeek, there was only one changing cell. Now you have 12 changing cells. Now, this is the sum. That means how much is warehouse 1, origin A supplying to the 4 distributor? That is a sum. Similarly for warehouse 2 and warehouse 3. This is the sum. This is the total quantity that destination A, distributor 1 is receiving from the 3 warehouses. That is for distributor 2, 3, and 4. Now also look at the sign. There is a capacity constraint. Remember, warehouse 1 cannot supply more than 4,500. Warehouse 2 cannot supply more than 2,500. Warehouse 3 cannot supply more than 5,000. Similarly, the demand for distributor 1 is 4,300, distributor 2 is 2,000, distributor 3 is 2,800, distributor 4 is 12,000, 2,900. Now, if you notice, this adds up to 12. This also adds up to 12. That means we have enough stock. It's just that we want to minimize the cost. Now, think about it. If you look at the cost matrix, warehouse 1, origin A, you are spending the least amount of money to supply the stock. But here's the problem. I can't just say that, hey, why not just use origin A to do 4,300 and 2,000 and 2,800 and 2,900? Because you don't have enough stock available. After all, we have a capacity constraint of 4,500. Now, if you say, fine, Havish, why don't we do 4,300 from A to A? Because that's the minimum value, right? 1.1. And there is still 200 left. Let's supply it to B. But do you think that will minimize the cost? We'll have to check that, isn't it? Also, what about the signs that I've kept? This is less than equal to because I can't supply more than what I have. But this is greater than equal to because after all, I need to receive at least 4,300. I'll tell you another reason why. Like in the case of Harpic, we had a carton of 12 units. That would be one carton. Okay. Now imagine a distributor like Big Bazaar, a retailer, a modern trade outlet like Reliance Fresh is asking for 1,000 unit. See, they will never ask you for 5 cartons or 12 cartons. You know why? Because every company, every product, the carton number of units differs. So it's very confusing. And I've handled Big Bazaar when I worked with Reckitt. They would typically say, I want 1,000 unit, not I want 80 cartons. Now, the problem is if I divide 1,000 by 12, it is not a perfect division. Now, I can't send 83.3 cartons to Reliance Fresh. Think about it. So if Reliance Fresh is placing an order for 1,000 unit, I will have to supply 84. And that is why, everyone, we are saying greater than equal to. Do you see the problem? If I had put equal to, like you're saying, Avish, if they want 4,300, why don't we supply 4,300? It's not that simple. Because of the cartonage value, I might have to supply a rounded value to them. I hope you're with me. Now, what is the formula that we keep to find the total cost? That is a sum product. So for the moment, I'm just keeping a dummy value, like 100 in all the cell, just a dummy value. And what will be the formula? Now, there are two ways of doing it. The older method, if you don't have dynamic arrays on Excel, is to do a sum product, which means I will first find the product of these 12 cells multiplied by these 12 cells, and then I will sum it up. In a way, I'm saying 1.1 multiplied by 100 plus 1.6 multiplied by 100 plus 1.4 multiplied by 100, like that. And the answer will be 2270. In fact, if you allow me, I'll just keep a random number that way you'll understand better. Okay. What does it mean? 1.1 multiplied by 263, 1.6 multiplied by 276. Similarly, 2.5 multiplied by 469, 2 multiplied by 329. After I multiply all these 12 cost matrix values with the quantity, then I will find the sum. This is the old method of doing it. The new method on the new version of Excel is that you can multiply it directly. That means I can multiply 12 cells with 12 cells. Now, obviously, if you're multiplying 12 cells with 12 cells, you will also get 12 results, isn't it? Like this. But we don't want 12 results. We want to find the sum. So I can do a sum like this. Now, please keep in mind, everyone. In fact, I'll do both of them, so that there's no confusion. Because if you don't have the latest version of Excel with you, then you will not be able to do the first formula that I did. Now, many of you will be thinking that, Avish, isn't sum product better? Like the first one, you have to first multiply and then find the sum. But you also have to understand the fact that this is much more dynamic and flexible. After all, in this, it will only do the product, multiply, and then find the sum. That's it. I can't control and change it to an average or a median or anything else. On the other hand, this everyone is in my control. For example, if I want to do a divide and I want to do an average. Now, there's no function called average divide in Excel. There is only sum product, which is a great function, by the way. But this is what we used to do like 10 years back when we did not have the ability in Excel to multiply or divide multiple cells with multiple cells. Now we do, so I can actually write formulas this way. Just go back and practice. If your version of Excel is older and this one is not supported, you can do sum product. And now we come to solver. Remember, you have to go through options, add-ins, and enable solver. So I go to data and Right on the far corner, we have solver. And in solver, you can see it's much more sophisticated than GoSeek. In GoSeek, you can only set a value. Remember, I said my target is, to do break even or to do a certain value, right? Like I said, I want to target a profit of 500 CR. In this, I can do the same. I can set a target value. So that means I can also do GoSeek's job in Solver, obviously. I can also do minimization. Like in this case, I want to minimize my cost, or maybe I want to maximize my profit, right? Also, if you notice, now the changing variable cells is not one cell, it could be multiple cell. That's the best part. In GoSeek, you only have one, now you have multiple cell. So I'm going to select all of these 12 because I want to keep different numbers in all of these 12 before I solve it. But here's the thing. If you don't have constraints, then there's no point. Because after all, if I did not have a constraint, then I would have supplied everything from warehouse one. After all, that is the cheapest. But we have a constraint, which means I will add a constraint, which is that the value that I'm shipping from my warehouse cannot be more than what I have with me, obviously. So it has to be less than equal to the capacity constraint. That is the first one. And the second one is that the demand has to be met at least. So how much I'm supplying to the Ford distributor has to be greater than equal to the minimum demand that they have. So I'll add it. Now, if you notice, these are two constraints I've kept. What is my objective? My objective is to set the cell B21 to minimize. Now, before I press OK, solve, think what is going to happen. It is going to experiment with different combinations of values in all these 12 cell values. Imagine how complex that is. And moreover, it will also keep in mind the constraints that are there. Imagine the number of combinations that you're working with. And finally, there are three methods that we have. Simplex, that is for simple linear programming. We have nonlinear, which is for a smooth nonlinear curve. And we have an evolutionary model where it's not a smooth curve. We'll not get into that much detail. After all, 99% of what you need is done on simplex. That's it. I click on solve and this is amazing. Check this out. Do you see this? It tells me almost instantaneously that Havish, you should supply 1600 from A to A, 2900 from A to D, 500 from B to A, 2000 from B to B, 2200 from C to A, 2800 from C to C. And that is how you will meet the demand, maintaining your capacity constraint and minimize the cost. Now, in case you're thinking, Havish, how can you be sure that we're minimizing the cost? Why don't I show you? What if I say, you know what? I don't want to supply 1600. I want to make it 1000 and I want to make it 600. We'll also have to change the other thing. Let's reduce this to 1400 and let's make this. Now, do you see I'm still meeting all the conditions, but my cost has gone up from 19 to 10. Now I'm spending more on transportation. And why would a business want that? So you notice earlier we were only spending 19 to 10, but that went up by $600. So I can assure you that mathematically speaking, this would be the most efficient combination. Yes, there are cases where there are multiple optimal solutions, but there is no way that any other combination with the given constraint and the cost matrix would have allowed us to reduce the cost even further. Yeah, so that closes our example. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm sure you do. And as a bonus, I also want to show you how you can do this on generative AI after this. I know it's quite a lot to digest in one day, in one session, but again, the idea is to make you aware of all these things, which I would still say 90% of Excel users have never used or have knowledge about. So you should already be proud of yourself that you now know what Excel can offer. Most people are oblivious to it, but yes, it will require not just practice, everyone, but also reading. Remember, you are working with optimization. So you have to go back to the books and you have to understand what is linear programming, what is an equation, right? What are constraints? It would be foolish to just focus on Excel. You should pick up a good, simple book or a guide or a website and also read about these topics, right? And just to show you something very cool, imagine if I had taken a screenshot. Okay, this is a bonus example, everyone. And I will go to Google Gemini Advanced. I'll paste my image. Now I'm saying I want to run linear optimization to minimize my cost. Okay, use pulp. Pulp is one of the libraries in Python. Now I also have to tell it this is my capacity constraint. So the capacity constraint, everyone, is that origin A capacity constraint is 4,500, origin B is 2,500, and origin C is 5,000. So if you notice, origin C is 5,000. And my demand is for A, it is, let's just take all the four numbers. So 43, 2, 28, and 29. I'll just copy it. So for demand B, then we have demand C, and finally we have demand D. Okay. And I will say, actually, you know what? I think that's it. I want to run linear optimization to minimize my cost. Use pulp on Python. This is my capacity constraint. This is the demand, everyone. And the cost matrix has been provided in the image. Check this out. It might not work perfectly the first time. I hope it will. But then even if it doesn't work, you can tweak it, right? But let's see what it is doing. It is creating my cost matrix, then my capacity, my demand. It is defining the variable. Now, on the free version of Gemini, you can get the code, but you can't run it directly. I'm using Gemini Advanced, where I can also run the code, everyone. And when I run it, it says there's an error, not to worry. Like I said, it won't run it because the library has to be installed, not to worry. I just copy it. I just close my example. I don't want to leave it half complete. I'll go to Google Colab. Google Colab, by the way, everyone, is a free way of using Python on the cloud without needing to install anything. So if you notice, I can just come here and I'll just put my code here. Just one thing I'll have to add is in the beginning, I'll have to say pip install because I'll have to install the package, right? So pip install, just a moment. And I think that should work. Let's hope it does. Just a moment. The first time you connect to Google Colab, it's free to use, by the way. While I do have a paid Gemini account, you can use it for free. First time it connects, it takes a few seconds, but after that, it becomes quite speedy, right? So let us wait for it to connect, and it is connected. And once it runs it, 1 second. Okay, it is installing the package, and if you see, it is minimizing the cost. Do you see this? How cool is that? I did not tell it. One more time. Remember, in the prompt I wrote, everyone, nowhere did I say the minimized cost is 19,210. It is doing it. It is telling me 19,210. And if you compare, look, right? Transport 3,800 units from A to A. Again, if you notice, even though it's giving you a different answer, let's check that. 3,800 from A to A, then 700 from A to D, 700 from A to D, then 500 from B to A, 500. Then we have 2,000 from B to B. Then we have 2,800 from C to C. And then finally, we have 2,200 from C to D. As you can see, I'm meeting my conditions. Yeah, like I said, it is sometimes you have multiple optimal solution. Like here, I got these results, and it's beautiful. I mean, the fact that I was just able to go to Gemini, literally tell it what my problem was in a conversational style, give it the image, and it gave me the entire code. I just had to copy and paste it, and I'm able to get the answer. It's fantastic. This, everyone, is a new era of work, right? I mean, you can't not do it, because remember, after all, what we are doing right now, in another year, imagine you will now be able to do it even on Python, on Excel. If you see, even here, I have now Python option. Even if you don't have it on your Excel, it will come in sometime. It will be free. So if you notice, I'm not sure if it will work perfectly, but let's give it a shot. If you notice, I think I should be able to put the same code pretty much. And let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure about the installation of the library, everyone, because there might be a different way to do that. Yeah, it says no module called pulp. Sure. So it was not able to access the module, but once those options are there as well, like in initialization, let me see if pulp can be added. No, exactly. So pulp is not supported, but theoretically, you can actually now do these things on Python as well, directly working on Excel. And just to show you an example I was covering earlier today, um, I was doing a class at MDI, and this is beautiful. Check this out. Do you see what I've done? I have, forget everything. Look at this. There's a chart made on Python. You can actually see the code behind it. Let me show you the code as well. This, everyone, is the code. Pretty cool. 17 products with their value. And I'm creating a bar chart. Now, you might say, fine, it's nice, Havish, but what's the big deal? The big deal, everyone, is that it's a dynamic chart. So when I change this to 50,000, I'm changing a value in my Excel cell, and that's changing the chart made on Python. And also, it's not just changing the result. If you notice, the line will actually move and the colors will change as well. Do you see this? Like if I make it 1,25,000, check this out. This is beautiful. Look at this. If I make it 2,50,000, it's actually moving the line and the numbers are changing as well. Like look at the way how Python code and Excel and dynamic arrays and VBA and solver can now all combine together to make you such a more capable user. I'm not saying Excel is the best tool in the world or it is going to replace everything, but the fact that we can do these things is very, very interesting, right? I wasn't able to do it for the transportation example, but I showed you on Google Colab. The reason it did not work on Excel Python is because Excel Python at the moment doesn't allow you to use pulp, but you get the idea, right? Cool. I think that's all from my side. Thank you for allowing me to stretch the session. I hope you found everything useful. I obviously will be sharing both the problem and the solution with you. You will have the recording as well. And do make sure to go back and practice all these things, everyone. But if you have any question, I'm happy to take it up. Nilesh, thank you. Glad to know that. Harsh, Drone, thank you. Ramu, thank you. Perfect. I think if there are no more questions, then we'll call it a wrap. Shrikant, thank you. Aman, thank you. Azhar, thank you. Paritosh, thank you. Rishabh, thank you.
Avish, can you come up with some session with ChatGPT or generative AI with data analysis?
Yes, that is something we have planned. Haven't been able to get the time to do that. Also, the other thing is that now there isn't just like one or two or three examples. There are like a bunch of different examples we can do. And now that we work with Power Query, in fact, earlier today, I was showing how you can even write complete Power Query M code using GenAI with absolutely no background. And it literally is like a copy and paste solution. So yeah, I mean, thank you for reminding. We are definitely considering doing that. We're just trying to figure out, should we do a little bit of all tools and all example, Or should we focus only on Excel, only on Power Query, or only on SQL, right? But yeah, definitely on the cards.
Thank you.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day, whatever is left of it. And hope to see you join us for the forthcoming sessions as well. All the recording, as well as the problem, the solution, and the presentation that I used will be shared with you, right? Thank you.